Sarah Chin sat quietly in seat 14C, just another passenger sipping water and avoiding small talk. Nobody knew the woman in the navy blazer was Major Phoenix Chin, a decorated F-16 pilot with 150 combat missions. When crisis struck at 35,000 feet, her secret would change everything forever. Before watching the full story, comment below from where you're watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more thrilling stories. The engines of Flight 447 hummed quietly as the Boeing 737 cruised smoothly through clear blue skies. Sunlight streamed through the small cabin as passengers settled in for what they expected to be a routine 3-hour flight from Denver to Phoenix. In seat 14C, Sarah Chin looked like any other business traveler. She wore a simple navy blazer over jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. A laptop bag rested under the seat in front of her. She glanced once at the man in 14B, who was already buried in spreadsheets on his laptop, and then turned back toward her window. To them, she was no one. But to the Air Force, she had once been everything. The flight attendants rolled carts down the aisles, offering drinks, snacks, and smiles. Children laughed a few rows back, tapping at their tablets. A young couple whispered about their weekend getaway, while an elderly woman adjusted her glasses and read a paperback novel. The cabin carried the gentle rhythm of normal life. No one paid attention to the woman in row 14 who kept her hands folded too neatly, her posture too straight, her eyes occasionally flicking toward the sky outside as though she was searching for something only she knew to look for. Sarah shifted slightly. The seatbelt pressed against her waist, and for the briefest moment she remembered the tight harness of her fighter jet, the roar of the engine behind her, the tremble of a missile locking on target. She pushed the memory away. That was another life. Or so she thought. The name Phoenix wasn't just a call sign. It was a reputation. She had earned it in the dust-choked skies of the Middle East, where she once guided her squadron out of a lethal ambush after her own jet was struck. She had risen from smoke and flames, refusing to eject, refusing to abandon the mission. For years, Sarah had carried herself with the steel of a warrior. But every warrior has a final mission, and hers had ended with one order she couldn't forget, one choice she couldn't forgive. That was the day she walked away. Now, dressed like a consultant and blending in among civilians, she looked like any other woman traveling for business. She had convinced even herself that she was done with the skies. Until the skies came calling again. 35 minutes into the flight, Sarah noticed something. The Boeing shuddered. Not turbulence, not weather. She had spent too many years in cockpits to mistake it. This was different, controlled, forced. She turned her head casually, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. And there it was. At first, just a glint, then 2, then 4. Jets. Her breath caught. They were fast, cutting across the blue like silver blades. The engines of the 737 whined harder as if in response, and for the first time passengers began to stir. A baby cried. The man in 14B looked up, confused. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've just been instructed to maintain current heading. You may see some military aircraft outside your windows. There is no cause for concern." No cause for concern? Sarah almost laughed. She knew that voice. That wasn't reassurance. That was fear. Gasps echoed through the cabin as the fighter jets drew close enough for everyone to see. Sleek F-16 Falcons, sunlight dancing off their wings. Her jets. Her world. The little boy 2 rows ahead pressed his face against the glass. "Mommy, look! Air Force planes!" Sarah's grip tightened around her armrest. She didn't want to be noticed. Not here. Not like this. But then, the unthinkable happened. Through the faint static of the cockpit radio, loud enough for the cabin speakers to catch fragments, came the words that made her blood run cold. "Passenger seat 14C. Repeat, confirm, call sign Phoenix Chin." The cabin froze. Every head turned. Eyes fell on her, the woman in the blazer. the quiet one. Sarah closed her eyes. She could no longer hide. Outside, the lead F-16 dipped its wing. A salute, not to Flight 447. To her, passengers whispered furiously. The man in 14B stared in disbelief. The elderly woman in 14A pressed her hand to her mouth. Wait, did they just say her? Someone muttered. Sarah finally exhaled, straightening her shoulders. The mask of anonymity slid away. She wasn't just Sarah anymore. She was Major Phoenix Chin. And whatever storm was coming, she was no longer just a passenger in 14C. The silence inside Flight 447 was suffocating. Every passenger had heard the words over the intercom. Passenger seat 14C, confirm call sign Phoenix Chin. And then, the salute. The F-16 pilots outside, cutting across the sky with lethal grace, had lowered their wings in respect. Not for the aircraft, not for the captain, but for her, the woman who until minutes ago had been nothing more than another face in the crowd. Major Phoenix Chin. The man in 14B shifted uncomfortably, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. You're Phoenix? He whispered, his voice trembling. Sarah didn't respond. She simply kept her gaze fixed on the jets outside. Her chest rose and fell steadily, like a soldier bracing for impact. Across the aisle, a mother clutched her child closer, while passengers further down craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the mysterious woman in 14C. The flight attendant approached hesitantly, eyes wide, her professional composure cracking. "Ma'am, is there something we should know?" Sarah didn't answer, because before she could, the cockpit radio hissed again. "This is Captain Reynolds speaking again. Folks, we've just been given instructions by NORAD. We're being redirected off our flight path. Nothing to worry about, but I need everyone to remain calm and stay seated." His voice cracked on the last word. Sarah's stomach tightened. NORAD! That wasn't standard procedure. Fighter jets didn't scramble to escort commercial flights without cause. Unless this wasn't an escort at all. Her mind flashed back to another cockpit, another sky. The desert night over Kandahar. The sky lit by traces and anti-aircraft fire. The voice of her wingman, Eagle 2, screaming in her ear before the line went dead. "Phoenix, break! Break now!" Silence. She had buried Eagle 2 with her own hands, buried too many. That night had been the last time she flew, the night that ended her career. And now, staring at the fighters outside, she felt the past claw its way back into the present. Passengers began to panic. Voices overlapped, sharp with fear. "Why are we being redirected? Is this a hijacking? Are we in danger?" The flight attendants tried to soothe them, but their own eyes betrayed uncertainty. Sarah remained silent, but every nerve in her body screamed. Her instincts as a pilot, as a soldier, told her the truth. Something was coming. Something bigger than this aircraft, bigger than these passengers. And for reasons she didn't yet understand, she was at the center of it. The cabin speakers hissed again. This time the voice wasn't the captain's. It was sharp, military, authoritative. "Major Phoenix Chin, United States Air Force. If you are aboard, identify yourself immediately." Gasps echoed. Heads turned. Every pair of eyes zeroed in on her. The businessman in 14B leaned back slowly, as if the proximity itself was dangerous. Sarah closed her eyes. She could stay silent, pretend, deny. But then the voice returned, harder this time. "Phoenix, if you can hear this, your country needs you. Now." The cabin went still. Even the child in row 12 stopped crying. Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. For 14 months she had buried Phoenix. For 14 months she had told herself she was done with the Air Force, done with sacrifice, done with carrying the weight of lives in her hands. But some truths refused to stay buried. She inhaled deeply, unclipped her seatbelt, and stood. Every passenger's gaze followed her. She wasn't wearing her uniform, but in that moment, her posture alone carried the weight of rank, of history, of war. "I'm Major Chin," she said finally, her voice steady, firm. "Phoenix." The cabin erupted. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. The flight attendant covered her mouth. The businessman in 14B muttered, "Oh my God." And outside, the lead F-16 dipped its nose once more, as if acknowledging her return. The radio hissed. The military voice returned. "Phoenix, stand by for orders. This isn't just an escort mission. There's been a breach, a threat, and you are the only one who can stop it." Sarah's heart froze. The only one. And in that instant, Seat 14C was no longer a passenger seat. It was a command post. The cabin of Flight 447 had changed. Moments ago, it was a place of families, business trips, and quiet routines. Now, it was a pressure chamber of whispers, fear, and questions none of them wanted to ask. And at the center of it stood Major Phoenix Chin. The woman in 14C was no longer invisible. She was the only calm face in a storm of panic. The intercom crackled again. "Major Chin, this is Captain Reynolds. We need you in the cockpit immediately." Passengers gasped. A few even clapped nervously, as though help had finally arrived. But others looked pale, clutching their armrests tighter. Sarah turned to the flight attendant nearest her. "Take me forward. Now." The attendant nodded quickly and led her down the narrow aisle. Heads turned, whispers chased her steps. Words floated in fragments. "Combat pilot." "Is it terrorists?" "What's happening?" The cabin that once ignored her now looked at her like salvation. Or damnation. Sarah stepped into the cockpit. The door locked behind her with a heavy click. Captain Reynolds sat rigid in his seat, sweat glistening on his forehead. Beside him, the first officer frantically adjusted dials. The radio crackled with sharp military commands. "Major Chin," the captain said, his voice strained but grateful. "I can't believe you're here." Sarah folded her arms. "Tell me what's going on." The first officer shot her a quick glance. "NORAD scrambled those Falcons because there's been a—" He stopped, unable to say it. "Say it," Sarah pressed. The captain took a deep breath. "There's been a breach. Someone on this flight isn't supposed to be here. And NORAD thinks this aircraft might be the target." Sarah's blood ran cold. She gripped the back of the pilot's chair, her voice low but firm. "You're saying there's a hostile on board?" "Not just on board," the captain said. "They think someone smuggled something dangerous." Her heart slammed in her chest. Weapons? Explosives? Biohazard? The first officer whispered, "They want you to identify it." Sarah's jaw clenched. "Why me?" The captain's eyes flicked to her, full of weight. "Because the threat isn't random. It's military. Someone out there is using your name, and only you can confirm if it's real or a setup." The cockpit filled with silence, broken only by the hiss of the radio. Sarah's pulse quickened, but her voice was steady. "All right," she said. "Patch me through." The first officer adjusted the frequency. A hard military voice came through, louder now. "Phoenix, listen carefully. Intelligence indicates a sleeper agent is on board your aircraft. We believe the agent has armed a device. We need you to verify and neutralize before the aircraft crosses restricted airspace." Sarah closed her eyes. Sleeper agent, armed device, on her flight. And the most chilling part, NORAD wasn't giving the pilots a choice. They were preparing to shoot down Flight 447 if the threat wasn't neutralized. Sarah opened her eyes, sharp and burning. "How long do we have?" The voice answered coldly. 25 minutes until you enter restricted airspace. After that, we can't guarantee this bird stays in the sky." The line went dead. 25 minutes. 200 passengers. One hostile. And only her to stop it. The door opened. Sarah stepped back into the cabin, her face composed, though her mind raced. Passengers looked at her, searching her expression for answers. The man in 14B whispered, "What did they say?" Sarah didn't answer him directly. She scanned the rows, eyes sharp, training taking over. Every bag, every face, every movement suddenly mattered. Somewhere in this cabin sat the key to survival, and somewhere in this cabin sat the end. Her eyes landed on a man in the rear of the aircraft, dark jacket, expression too calm, hands folded too neatly in his lap. He glanced at her for just a second too long. Her instincts screamed. The device wasn't just an idea, it was here, and the countdown had begun. The hum of Flight 447's engines felt louder now, like a ticking clock. 25 minutes. That's all the time they had before NORAD would be forced to make a decision no one on this aircraft would survive. And every soul on board looked to the woman in seat 14C, Major Phoenix Chin. Sarah stood in the aisle, her body steady even as fear rippled through the cabin like wildfire. Passengers whispered furiously, "Is it a hijacking? Why is the military after us? Who is she really?" The flight attendants hovered nervously, looking to Sarah for guidance, their polished smiles gone. Sarah raised a hand, her voice cutting through the tension like steel. "Everyone stay calm. We have a situation, but we're going to handle it. Stay in your seats, keep your belongings where they are, and listen carefully to instructions." It wasn't loud, but it carried authority. The kind of voice that didn't ask for obedience. It commanded it. The whispers died down. For now. She turned to the head flight attendant. "I need access to your manifest, passenger list, seating chart, and crew assignments. Now." The attendant hesitated only a moment before rushing to fetch it. Sarah scanned the rows again. Her instincts sharpened, her pilot's discipline returning like muscle memory. She wasn't looking for the obvious. She was looking for the almost invisible. The two still hands, the unnatural calm, the bag that didn't belong. And then she saw him again. Rear cabin, dark jacket, eyes locked on her just long enough to matter. Sarah walked down the aisle, slow and deliberate. Every pair of eyes followed her. Some passengers looked at her with awe, others with fear. When she stopped at the man in the dark jacket, his lips curled in a faint, too casual smile. "Is there a problem, Major?" he asked softly. Her heart pounded. "Stand up." His smile widened, but he obeyed, rising to his feet with the slow confidence of someone who had nothing to hide, or someone who wanted to be noticed. Sarah patted down his jacket, checked his seat, his carry-on. Nothing. Too easy. Her instincts screamed louder. "Who are you?" she demanded. He met her eyes without flinching. "Just a businessman, flying to Phoenix." But the way he said Phoenix, deliberate, like a knife twisting, chilled her blood. She grabbed his boarding pass from the seat pocket. Flight 447, seat 28C. The name read, Daniel Cross. She froze. Daniel Cross wasn't just any name. She knew it. From a briefing years ago. A defense contractor turned rogue. A man linked to stolen weapons technology and mercenary deals overseas. Her pulse spiked. If Daniel Cross was on this flight, then this wasn't random. This was a setup. But why here? Why now? Before she could press further, a shout erupted from the front of the cabin. "Something's wrong with the Wi-Fi system!" a passenger yelled, holding up his phone. "My screen just froze. There's code on it." Dozens of heads swiveled, phones lit up with strange scrolling text. Lines of military-grade encryption flashing across passenger screens. Sarah's stomach dropped. It wasn't just a bomb, it was a cyber weapon, and if it hijacked the plane's systems, she didn't want to finish the thought. The intercom burst alive with NORAD's voice, sharp and final. Phoenix, status report. You have 18 minutes before we take action. If you cannot neutralize, we shoot you down. Sarah's eyes locked on Daniel Cross, who now smiled like the devil himself. You're running out of time, Major, he whispered. Her fists clenched. For the first time since she left the Air Force, Phoenix felt the weight of command crash back onto her shoulders. And this time, failure meant 200 innocent lives. The cabin froze. That click could have been the sound of salvation, or the end of them all. Sarah's breath hitched as the red light on the device blinked twice, and then died. Darkness swallowed its threat. For a long second, no one moved. Then the passengers erupted in sobs of relief, cries echoing through the steel shell of Flight 447. But Daniel Cross wasn't done. You think you've won? He spat, laughter cutting through the joy. That was just one piece. The real weapon was you, Phoenix. You chose them over the mission, and that choice has already lit the fuse. Sarah stared at him. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was trembling. For the first time, the mask had cracked. She tightened her grip on the device, stepped forward, and with one swift strike drove her elbow into his jaw. He collapsed, silent at last. The radio crackled. NORAD's voice, ice cold. Phoenix, confirm status. Final authorization before intercept. Do we fire? Sarah lifted the handset, her knuckles white. Every soul on the plane stared at her, waiting for her answer. Her voice came calm, sharp, and resolute. Negative. Threat neutralized. Flight 447 secure. A pause. Silence stretched.